The worst advice that is given to almost everybody on their wedding day is don't go to bed angry. And I absolutely do not like this piece of advice.
Oh, it's not? You don't?
Mm-mm.
Why not?
Because
what would you say is one of the biggest sources of conflict and marital breakdown that no one's talking about?
the in-law conflict. Have you and your partner ever gotten to a disagreement over your mother-in-law? That response, over 86% of people say yes. We have gotten into conflict about that. What do we know about boys and girls? Girls are emotionally and socially more advanced at 18 months to 2 years old. They're already attuned to emotions, whereas boys develop slower.
Fathers have boundless love for their daughters because it's the only time he'll experience unconditional love. Mothers butt heads with daughters because it's the only time they're forced to deal with the full range of female emotions.
You have to understand that the moment you disconnect is the moment your partner's brain gets the signal that this is dangerous. You don't have to problem solve this here, but you have to let your partner know where you are.
Are there any red flags regarding a partner's relationship with their parent?
One of the red flags would be saying, I'm gonna call my mom and check in with her on that. Another one is,
Dr. Tracy Dalgleish, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks, Max, for having me.
Thanks for coming out. The title of your book is cheeky, actually. You, your husband, and his mother. And I'm not married, but I gather we're going to cover some really interesting topics that are far outside of my wheelhouse. So I'm excited to dive in.
Amazing. And thank you so much. And I just love the topic. I love the title because it really does speak to the dynamic. And I know we're going to talk more about this, but it's been incredible to see the reaction to the book.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to get into it. So let's dive straight in. What would you say is one of the biggest sources of conflict and marital breakdown that no one's talking about?
Yeah, it really is the in-law conflict that people are not talking about. I mean, we know the top issues for couples, which is sex, kids, finances. How do we communicate? Everybody comes to my office wanting to communicate better and feel more connected. But as a psychologist and couples therapist with almost 20 years experience, every single person comes into my office wanting to get on the same page. And it's not just about being aligned and solving problems, it's also about bringing in their extended family members. We all have this desire to stay connected to family. And yet for so many couples, Max, they don't have a system. They don't know how to do it. You have two different people bringing in two different family systems. And it's incredibly challenging, which is really what prompted the book, because there is no resource like this. And I've walked couples through my 5-step vault method. I've seen it work. And then people feel more connected, more satisfied, and also ready for the holiday event that's going to come up.
I'm so pumped to get into the 5-step, the vault method that I've heard so much about. But this is actually kind of shocking because we always talk about on this show, we cover a lot of the research on longevity, living a long and healthful lifespan. And often what comes up is the value of social connections and being deeply immersed in the family unit. But there's like a potential dark side there, I suppose, is what you're elucidating.
And research shows that the proximity to your in-laws can be a predictor of how you're doing. So if you're too close to them, especially with his parents, then you could have more conflict in the home. But it's kind of shocking because you think, oh, closeness is good. But closeness doesn't necessarily mean a healthy relationship. And it's really interesting because as I speak to people about this book, a lot of people will say, yes, I have positive relationships with my mother-in-law or extended family. And then when I change the question to, have you and your partner ever gotten to a disagreement over your mother-in-law? That response, over 86% of people say yes. We have gotten into conflict about that.
It's so interesting because, I guess the framing based on the title, I gather that it's written for women. But in my family, like a big source of drama growing up was my father's in-law, like my mom's mom, my maternal grandmother, was always around. And at least what I gather from my father's perspective is that it wasn't the most pleasant of circumstances for him.
You're mentioning a common thing I hear, which is sometimes it is her mom. And I've had many people say, well, why didn't you title it You, Your Husband, and Her Mother? And research and clinically, I see that the conflict is higher. There's a greater percentage when it comes to him and his mom. And there's a specific reason for that. That doesn't mean that conflict doesn't exist with her mom. But when we kind of peel back the layers and we look at developmental pieces for people, what do we know about boys and girls? Girls are emotionally and socially more advanced at 18 months to 2 years old. They're already attuned to emotions, whereas boys develop slower. We then bring in the social components, which is that for many men, boys, they were taught, pull up your socks. If you're hurt, the team needs you. Get back out to the team. No sense crying over spilt milk. Whereas for girls, they're socialized more or less to feel their emotions, not anger. That's a whole other topic. But so then girls in general, not all, but many women have a lot of practice setting boundaries with their parents. There's this understanding that the angry teenage girl rages at her mother. And I even think of my own children. They're now 8 and 10. But when my daughter was 5, my youngest, at 5 years old, she's slamming the door and screaming, "I hate you." And she's not saying she hates me. She's saying, "I'm upset right now and I'm angry." And that was at a much earlier age than my son. So it was really interesting to see that. So then for men, what I see in therapy is that they come in typically around a big life event. They're getting married, they're having a baby, they're having the second baby. And the conflict in their relationship is that she's asking him to set boundaries with his mother, but he's never been able to do it before.
Yeah, I mean, guys, we're taught to, I guess, repress our emotions. Women, girls tend to be more fiery, I suppose. Not in a negative way, not in like a derogatory way, but yeah, I guess that can be challenging.
Yeah, men, not all, but many are more avoidant in their coping strategies. They shut things down, compartmentalize. I think of one of the men that I worked with, we used a storage container as an analogy. And so he would almost picture like all of these boxes in a storage container, things he doesn't address. And we worked together for almost 2 years before then coming to my session one day saying, "We're struggling in our marriage."
Wow. There's a tweet that actually, or a post on X that went viral recently that I want to read to you, and I want to get your reaction to it, because I sent it to my little brother, actually, because he's got 2 young daughters. And I just thought it was fascinating. I honestly didn't know what to think of it. I wanted to get his perspective, but you're an expert. He's not.
How old are his kids?
His kids are young. One is like 3, and the other is 2, or maybe even younger. And they're terrors. They're screaming all the time, but I love them because, they're an extension of me.
As 3 and 2-year-olds too.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this tweet was really interesting, and it went super viral. Let's see. It's got like 1.3 million views on X. Fathers have boundless love for their daughters because it's the only time he'll experience unconditional love. Mothers butt heads with daughters because it's the only time they're forced to deal with the full range of female emotions. I thought that was very interesting.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that sometimes it might be, I mean, my interpretation of this is that sometimes it might be hard unless you've got like a really acute and exquisite sense of self-awareness to experience the full range of emotions, unless you're confronted with like a direct mirror in relationship. But when you have like a daughter, you can't avoid it.
They're going to be your mirror. Children are your mirror. And I think of this one client who really couldn't recall many memories from his childhood. He would say, "I have memories at 12, but I don't remember anything before that." And then yet when his child would get angry and slam the door, run down the hall, he would just feel this rush of anger through him. And it was that reflection back that he was never allowed to feel anger growing up. And while he didn't have specific memories from his childhood, that was a really good indicator for him of how did you deal with emotions? What did your parents do? And so, yes, our children are these mirrors for us. And it's really interesting. I kind of go into this conceptualization of what you've just read from this tweet. And it's almost like, wow, that's really difficult, though. If a man can't sit across from his partner and feel that unconditional love. And that, to me, speaks to some of those core struggles that most men experience. Most men in my therapy room, when it comes down, when I peel away the frustration, I come into this sense of inadequacy, this fear of never being enough or never measuring up. And for so many men in therapy, the reason they're not able to communicate with their partners is because they go into problem solving mode. Why do they problem solve? Because they want to feel adequate. Oh, my wife has a problem. I can connect with her in this way. Rather than stripping away all of that and sitting with her in her vulnerability, in his own vulnerability, and to say, can you love me unconditionally in this way? So it's really interesting because our children are not responsible for healing us. We have to do our own healing. But then to feel this unconditional love with your daughter, why is it that you don't allow that in your marriage? And then, yes, as a woman then, to have all of those emotions reflected back. And although girls are validated more when they're younger, women are taught not to be angry. Can I swear on this podcast?
Of course, yeah.
Oh. You know, women are taught, you're a bitch if you're angry. So don't be angry. But then you're taught to shove it down. Then when you shove it down, you grow resentful and it boils over.
Damn. So the problems then, is it primarily that it's sort of like reverse magnetism, having two women in this, under the same roof? Or is it more about the relationship that the man has with their mother? Or is it some combination of both that's driving conflict?
Yeah, let's break that open, because I think you're saying, what is this conflict really about? And I think when women raise their children and sons, that as a mother, that could be your entire role, your entire identity. And while there's a real beauty in that, there's also a downfall of that, because your children are constantly separating from you. At 4 weeks old, they realize their eyes shift and they realize that mom holding baby is a separate person from them. At 8 months old, your caregiver's holding a baby and they push you away. They want to go down the floor. At 2 years old, they scream no, they want something, right? So there's this evolution that our job as we develop is to individuate and separate from family, because we're supposed to be our own autonomous being. And I often think of it like two circles. Here's me, here's my son. And we come together. But so often in families, it starts to look like this.
Is that enmeshment?
It could be enmeshment. It could be fusion, codependency, depending on what's going on in the family dynamic. And so then the tricky piece here is, well, what's happening for mom? So now her son is turning to another woman. And she might question, well, what's my role in the family? And that can stir up insecurity and uncertainty. And then we bring in expectations. And then we have people who maybe don't know how to communicate. And then the reason why this conversation is so important right now, Max, is that women today are doing differently than women in previous generations. Just in the last even 10 years. We're parenting in a different way. We're dividing the mental load, the invisible, visible labor in a different way. We're showing up in workplaces differently. And so anytime someone does something that's very different from you, a mom might then say, did I do it wrong? But that looks different. Or maybe I don't understand. And so then mother-in-law has all of these coping mechanisms that she uses. Am I going to talk to you about it? Am I going to be curious? Or is this threatening that I push it away and engage in all this other kind of strategy around that, which is the 10 toxic dynamics I outline in the book.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that. But what do healthy boundaries look like? Because also what's fascinating, we've talked recently about like the grandmother hypothesis. Are you at all familiar with that?
Tell me about this one.
So the grandmother hypothesis basically presents this framework for understanding why humans live so long, so much longer beyond their reproductive prime. And because, menopause strikes, and we've done a number of episodes on menopause of late, and it is a struggle for many women going through it. The symptoms, there are physiologic changes that can be quite uncomfortable. And so the question is, like, why did evolution set us up for spending so many years, more than half, at this point, almost half of our lives in this post-reproductive state? And the grandmother hypothesis basically posits that grandmothers played an instrumental role in fostering our offspring, who basically come out of the womb relatively undeveloped.
Yes.
Compared to other primates.
Yes.
Like we complete our gestation essentially socially, like out in the world. And so we needed the the additional hands of and care of the grandmother. So all that is to say that grandmothers play a very important role, likely, at least according to this hypothesis, in our development, in the success of our species. But then there seems to be all this conflict involved today.
Yes.
At least.
Which is exactly why I wrote this book. Because of course we want strong relationships. Women want the village. Very few people come to me saying, I can't even think of any client that has come to me saying, I am completely ready to cut off this woman and be estranged. Everybody comes wanting something different. We are social beings. We desire this connection. We desire this proverbial village that we're kind of sold, right? Have a child, here's the village, everyone's there to support you. And yet, I think what happens though is these two different generations come in with their own expectations and they're not communicated about. And then we bring in family systems. Mother-in-law, comes in with her own dynamics of what is working for her, but also even what she experienced as a mother. Did her mother-in-law just come over unannounced and expect to be included in all of the things? Versus today, someone might say, I need more privacy and here are my boundaries and this is what I need. And then we also bring in what a daughter-in-law brings to the table. And I talk about 3 different daughters-in-law styles in the sense that we show up with our own stuff. And if we're not aware of it, that can be really difficult in the dynamic. I think of this one client. She grew up in an emotionally neglectful home and her father was intrusive, asking questions about her day. And if she didn't want to answer, he would rage and get really upset. And so now as an adult, she experiences her mother-in-law with the mother-in-law, by the sounds of it, had good intentions, trying to connect and engage and ask questions. How's work? What are you working through right now? How's baby? Things like that. But she experienced it as intrusive because her old lens was, if I don't respond in the right way, just like my father, she'll rage back at me. Like that's our own stuff that we bring into this dynamic.
It's fascinating. And also
it's
probably
complex.
It's super complex. And it's also probably like generationally we're so generation to generation we're so different today, whereas in the past, like historically, there was probably a lot less of a difference generation to generation. But now we're in the era of like exponential change.
Oh yes. And also how we show up in families. So I think of even my own experience growing up. My grandmother didn't live in proximity to us. And so we would have a phone call once every 3 months. I would talk to her. She maybe got 1 picture of me a year. That was the relationship. She would come. She'd bring some finished sweet bread for us as kids. Memories, great memories. But what does a grandmother expect today? She texts as soon as baby is born. Can I have a picture? I haven't received a picture in 3 days. Can I have another one? Can we do a FaceTime so I can see baby? So it's just this expectation now of instant communication and connection.
It's like boundary rupture.
Yes, right? How many photos are we supposed to send?
Right.
And there's no right or wrong. And I know it comes from a good place of I want to be included in my grandbaby's life. And how do we then do this together? And we haven't even touched on the dynamic then between husband and wife and what he does with mom.
Yeah.
Should we go there?
Yeah, please.
It's such an interesting experience because here is a man who has grown up in this family system. And when you grow up in family systems, you might not be aware of what the dynamics are. So for example, I think of one client where she would say to her husband, your mom's guilt tripping us. And he would say, what? No, she's not. That's just mom. No, I think you're being too sensitive. So instead of getting curious, he turns against his wife and ends up protecting mom. He's desensitized to the struggle in the family. You grow up in that dynamic. It makes complete sense because as a child, he had to survive. And survival as a child means, how do I remain connected to my caregiver? I'm going to do anything to remain connected, which means I might get really big with my emotions or I might stuff them away. And if he learned to stuff his emotions away and mom then was happy, that's positive. Now fast forward 20, 30 years and mom's not happy. What is he automatically going to do? Our brains are wired to repeat old patterns, right? The neurons that fire together, it's going to happen right in the middle of wife and mom. And so he's in this bind where he looks to mom and he thinks, well, I have to keep her happy. But then he looks to his wife and says, it's, it's not that big of a deal. And I say this to every man that I work with. If you are in this conflict, recognize that the goal here is not to abandon your family, but instead to now choose your chosen family. Prioritize the emotions and needs in the home, and then find a way to bring in extended family. And it works for both sides of the family.
It's super. Yeah, it sounds like a really important boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You argue that sometimes starting with self-awareness can be more effective than confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Self-awareness is what's happening inside of me. What am I feeling? What's this urge that I'm having? What thoughts am I having? What feelings? If I act on this, does it align with what's important to me? Or does it pull me away from that? So that self-awareness really is this moment-to-moment understanding of what's going on for me. Versus when we get reactive, we snap, we're acting from the back of our brain, the amygdala that's firing through anger, our nervous systems are going into fight or flight. We're not going to be productive communicators then. And we do need to go through that process of what's this about? Why is this coming up for me? What do I need? And how do I communicate that to my partner?
And does this parlay into the VALT method?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So tell us about that.
Okay. So VALT is an acronym for all of the 5 steps, but it's also this metaphor for what you want to do in your relationship, because relationships are meant to be a sound structure. You don't want to be against your partner. You want to be on the same team. And I teach couples, it's not you versus me. It's you and me against the problem. So how do we then view this thing outside of us? And if we can build our vault, then we're sturdy and we can move forward. So vault, the V stands for values. This is all about discovering what's really important to me. What's our North Star? And how do we do this as a couple? And this is different from goals, because goals are things like, I'd like to see mom once a month, or I'm going to the gym three times a week. Those are goals. Values are family, connection, health. And so first, prioritizing what's really important to you as a first step. And Max, I intentionally did this because if we started with boundaries as a first step, guess what people will respond with?
Defensiveness?
Absolutely. They'll get so defensive, because if she's coming in, I'll just give a general example. If she's coming in and saying, you need to set a boundary with your mom, call her and tell her she can't just show up while I'm nursing baby. I'm using a parent as an example, and baby's sleeping and I'm trying to get things done for the day. She can't just keep showing up every day like this. He shuts down because he doesn't know how to do it. Or he gets defensive because he's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, just answer the door, let her come in for 5 minutes. It's fine. So we don't want to go there first. But so we do values first. The A stands for aspirations. I hear from so many couples that they both aligned in their values, like the value of family, of career. And then when it came down to leaving 35,000 feet in the air to then being on the ground, people are not aligned. In the sense that one couple, as an example, he wants to go to his mom's house for espresso and biscotti every Sunday night.
Sounds lovely.
It does.
But every Sunday night?
But then they have kids. And so she's thinking, Sunday night at 7? I have a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old. And then how are we preparing for the week? And they go to bed at 6:30, but you want me to haul everyone there. So she's saying, can you just, maybe we go once a month, or maybe we skip a Sunday every once in a while. And he doesn't want to do that. So that's a conflict. That's tension right there. Then we go into understanding your triangle. And I love this step, because so often people will say, you're putting me in the middle. So a husband will say to his wife in therapy, you keep putting me in the middle of my mom and you. Or she'll say, you're putting me in the middle because you do nothing. And then I'm the bad guy. I'm the scapegoat. But I propose it's actually a triangle. Because what do we do when there's conflict between two people? To alleviate stress, anxiety, or distress, we bring in a third person. And the consequence to that, though, is that all relationships are weakened. And so as a couple, you need to understand what's that triangle and how do we step out of it. The L is limits and boundaries. And one of the things I teach in this chapter is the 3 essential things, or in this step, is the 3 essential things that people need to set boundaries as a team. Because again, if I go to you saying you need to set a boundary and you don't understand why and you're not willing to do it, we're just going to bump heads. So I talk about first, the willingness. Second, the importance. You have to understand why this matters. And then actually the ability. Because Max, the word boundary is so overused and people don't really understand what it means to set a boundary.
What are boundaries?
Yeah. Boundaries are what I am or I'm not willing to do. It's all about me and nothing about you. And most clients come in saying, I set this boundary and they did whatever it was. I don't want to talk about politics at the Thanksgiving table. And they all brought up politics again. They're arguing in front of me. And I indicate to them, well, saying that is actually a request. You're asking someone else to do something different. But instead, what will you do when other people do the thing that doesn't work for you? Are you going to sit there? Are you going to argue with them? Or will you say, okay, guys, this is where I excuse myself. Maybe you go to the bathroom, text your group chat, take the babe for a walk, all those things.
Now, how rigid should boundaries be?
Oh, this is a big one, because I think what happens for so many people is they live in this space of passivity for so long. They start to realize how resentful they feel. And instead of swinging into more of that healthy boundary space, they swing it past it to rigidity. And we do that, don't we? It just as humans, when we're like, okay, January 1st, I'm going to start my new routine. I'm at the gym 6 days a week when you haven't been at the gym for 5 months. And then what happens after 2 weeks? Everybody drops out because there's not this pacing of doing something. I think of that often around boundaries. Healthy boundaries have flexibility. They're going to depend on who that person is, what kind of relationship you want with that person, and ultimately what matters to you.
Okay, so I think we're up to T.
T is take action. And this is where I'm going to walk people through step by step how you actually do this with your partner and with that family member, whether it's your mother-in-law or sister-in-law or your own mom. How do you actually do this? And we talk about the anticipate. That's the first step. Because here's the thing, families are predictable and consistent. If the last time you were there, they commented on your parenting or they made a body comment or politics, they're likely going to do it again. So you prepare yourself for this. How do you and your partner prepare for that? And then the second step is act. What are we doing in those moments? How do we stay on the same page? And then the last one is adjust. This is where couples miss doing something different. It's the chance to repair if something was hard, the chance to debrief, or just to support each other and say, hey, that guilt tripping comment was a doozy, but we stayed on the same page and that was great.
What is the best way to initiate difficult conversations?
Right. We often go into these moments just headstrong. There's two approaches. We go in really, fight or flight. I'm going to tell you how it is. There's no flexibility. Or we go in with kind of the tiptoeing around something. And I always say, give reassurance to someone with hard conversations first. This is the understanding that you have prefaced this by saying, hey, can we talk about something important? And then you're going to give reassurance. Reassurance really helps to drop someone's defensiveness. It doesn't have to be long. It's just something like, we love holidays and I know how important it is to you. And then being able to communicate clearly, concisely, and not with a lot of details about what it is that you need.
Is there a best time of day to,
that
is
depends.
it like maybe not first thing in the morning or maybe not right before bed when you're trying to rest and digest, unwind?
Oh, and couples argue at night. And the worst advice that is given to almost everybody on their wedding day is don't go to bed angry.
Interesting. Don't go to bed angry.
And I absolutely do not like this piece of advice.
Oh, it's not? You don't? Why not?
Because when you're angry, your nervous system is in fight or flight. Or what happens is one person shuts down. And if you're going to try to resolve the anger and actually work through it, that requires you to both be calm, connected, aligned. You can't do that at the 11th hour when you are supposed to be in this state of resting, when you're supposed to be sleeping. So I often say to people, park what this is. Nothing in your relationship is code red. It's not urgent. It feels like it's on fire because your brain and your body is telling you that. But if you can park that onto the table or the dresser or outside the bedroom even, come together in some way. A hug, reassurance, appreciation that you're in this together, saying, we don't necessarily agree on this, but I'm here with you and we're going to get through this. And that's what I know about us.
Wow.
That is so much more powerful at the end of the night than saying, okay, well, we have to find an agreement on this and you have to see all my anger and how are we going to work through this?
Yeah. I mean, whenever I've been in relationship in the past, like if drama begins to affect my, my sleep, then it amplifies like the negativity, it amplifies like in my own head, the drama, because it's like, okay, not only do I have conflict in the relationship that I am willing to deal with, but now I'm also like, we're bleeding into my sleep. It's going to affect my quality of sleep. I'm going to be not feeling my most optimal tomorrow. So yeah, it's
long-term research studies on relationships show that relationship distress impacts physical health and mental and emotional well-being. And that's why prioritizing your relationship and understanding your staff and them doing their stuff work and then coming together, that's why this is so important. Because when people are spiraling into their negative cycles and they can't work through that, sleep's impacted, you're less resilient, your stress markers would be higher. All of that comes together. That's not healthy.
At what point in your career did it dawn on you that in-laws and the relationships that individuals have with their significant others, family members, was a major factor in conflict in relationship?
Right at the beginning, perhaps,
Wow.
working with couples and hearing some of the main conflicts. But the idea or the first kind of genesis of this book was in 2011 when I was in Istanbul for a conference. I was presenting some research and I'm walking through the spice market and there's a seller and he's just this booming voice and he's yelling out, get some sumac, get your spices, get a beautiful scarf for your mother-in-law. And then he looks at me, or perhaps some poison. And it was so interesting to be across the world in a different time, space, religion, culture. And the trope of the mother-in-law was still there. And it was that, and I didn't have a mother-in-law yet. And I was, on the trajectory in the sense we were a long-term committed relationship. I knew it was in our future. And I had also had all of this experience with couples. And then to hear this, that was the moment where I thought, we're struggling with this. We do not know how to do this.
Well, all the dots had connected in that moment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. What are some other common sources of conflict that present to you?
For couples?
Yeah. Because you're a couples therapist, right?
Yes. Yes. I did my research in emotionally focused couples therapy as well. So my PhD research is along that. And then I've been working with couples for almost 20 years, which is just wild. And, I think a lot of people will say, well, tell me what's the common thing? And we can go to those 5 factors: extended family, sex, communication, finances, kids. And yet it's so interesting because everyone comes into my office and I've heard it all. We're fighting over how to boil water. We're fighting over the right way to slice a carrot. And underneath that, I see something so much different. We all have these triggers, and then they lead us to get into our own stories and assumptions and perceptions about our partner that often aren't even true. They come from our histories. It's like, I roll up with my suitcase here and I've got all my baggage in there. And if I haven't unpacked it, I'm not going to understand what's triggering between me and you. And then underneath all of that, it comes back to our attachment, longings, and needs. And so at the core of every argument I hear, do I matter to you? Am I important? Will you turn to me? Am I adequate? Am I enough? Am I worthy? And that's what our core conflicts are all about. Just knowing, when I walk into the room, are you going to put your phone down and pay attention to me? And every time you don't, what a message that sends to my brain.
Would you say that that's a uniquely female take on conflict in relationship, or do men typically, does that truth hold true for men as well?
It holds true for men as well, because we're all attachment beings. From cradle to grave, we seek connection from our caregivers. As a baby, we don't hold our babies out like this. There, you're good. We hold them here, right? Your nieces, you're going to give them a big hug. You're going to swing them around. And if they're crying, you squeeze them in. That's closeness. We never lose that longing. to be close and to be seen. It's for men and women. I think for a lot of men, they push it away and say that that's not what they need. Or there's so much fear and shame underneath there. And shame often lives right beside vulnerability. And it's so hard then to be vulnerable in relationships.
Wow. What were the 5 major sources of conflict that you listed again? One was sex, one was...
Sex, finances, communication, extended family, and...
I don't know if it was 5.
No, I did say 5. There's 5. Finances.
Finance.
Did I say 5? Yeah. Sex, finances, extended family, kids, communication. And every couple comes into my therapy room saying, we want to learn how to communicate better. We want to feel more connected. Isn't that interesting? That really is at the core of what people are saying.
What are some ways to communicate that in the middle of conflict? Like say you're arguing about the proper way to peel a carrot. Like, how do you pump the brakes and show the person that you're quarreling with, what truly matters in that moment?
The first piece is always, how do we stop this cycle between us? We have to recognize that we're in a cycle and we have to pause it. Because when you're in it, you're often arguing from your egos. You're arguing from what you believe to be right or wrong. And people love to be right. And we choose that over choosing connection. And if we can then pause what's happening, then we can make our next choice. But you have to slow it down. And then oftentimes that's then the self-reflective piece of, what's happening for me here? This isn't really about the carrots. And when people get frustrated or angry, I ask them, slow this down and ask yourself, what's underneath this? Anger and frustration are secondary emotions. They're not the core of it. They're easier feelings. I remember working with one man in therapy for years, and he would always respond with, well, I'm frustrated. So when your partner comes to you, what are you feeling? Frustrated. Okay, frustrated, sad, frustrated, anxious, frustrated, alone. Men
need broader emotional vocabularies.
And it's so important. And this isn't just, here's this woman therapist on your podcast saying, come on, men, let's rally on the emotions. There's a reason for this. Because if you can label what the feeling is, that's like someone throwing you a life raft. It's soothing. You're like, oh, it's sadness. And so over time with this client, he learned that it was sadness when his partner came to him because he went to that place of, I don't know how to keep her happy. And that must mean I'm not a good partner. I'm not a good husband. Totally internalizing that.
What about for people who are prone to shutting down and dissociating? That's sometimes my problem. Like I'm a fairly articulate person, I think. But in the heat of the moment, in conflict and relationship, my toxic trait is I tend to dissociate, and all of the words that I would otherwise have access to, get constrained, almost like as if going through like a funnel or like a hose with a kink in it. And I shut down, and I just become unable to communicate how I'm feeling.
You become flooded in the moment. The Gottmans have done great research in their lab. It's called the Love Lab. And when they have men and women talk about a difficult conversation, men's markers, their heart rate, blood pressure, all go up through the roof. Women's increase a little bit. But for men, biologically, you go right into that, I am flooded. And that flooded place it's almost like word salad. Or I don't know, I'm confused. You'll notice a lot of rapid eye blinking when someone shuts down. Or I would have one man in therapy where he would cross his arms and he would look up to the ceiling. And you can imagine if you're trying to engage with me and I do this, like what's that doing to your nervous system? You're going to say, oh, you're not paying attention to me? Why aren't you listening to me? You're crossing your arms.
That happens to me too.
Right.
I become like even eye contact becomes really difficult.
Yes.
Because I retract. I'm like, I can't even look the person in the eye.
Yeah, so your nervous system is going to this shutdown place. And I even think of this other client who would like put her hoodie on and would like go inward like this if she sensed any conflict with her partner. They're all protective mechanisms. Often they started even before this relationship that you're in. And so then your job is to learn, how do I be in my body in these moments? Because you have to understand that the moment you disconnect is the moment your partner's brain gets the signal that this is dangerous. And you'll know this with your nieces, that if you don't pay attention to the first time, they're going to pull for you a little bit more. And then when you're still looking at your phone, I don't know if you are, but if you're still like disengaged, they're going to kick you next. And then you're like, hey, don't kick. And then they're going to scream at you, right? So it's this primal panic that goes off in our partner's brain when you shut down. And so you learning to stay engaged is so important, which I know you do. You have other people on the podcast that have talked about the body work. So that's how do I go from numb, shut down to engaged? You might do co-regulation with your partner, squeeze their hand, using words so you can hear it. We're in this together. And the other thing too that I tell people, Max, is you don't have to problem solve this here, but you have to let your partner know where you are. And so we talk about walking around it. You say to them, I'm just going to let you know that I've just completely shut down. This isn't because I don't want to do this with you. This is just where my brain and body go. So I want you to know this is where I'm at. And I'm going to maybe go take 20 minutes. I'll go for the walk and then we'll come back to it. But for those who shut down, you have to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said about, I guess a way to describe it would be productive distance. Like actually pressing stop or pause and leaving the situation and going for a walk, or maybe even getting a good night's sleep and then coming back.
And you might do it by yourself, or some people can do it together. Go for a walk and hold your partner's hand, or squeeze their shoulder and say, we're in this together. That right there is so soothing for the nervous system. It could even be, I remember with one client, we just worked on doing shoulder rolls. So rolling her shoulders back to stay engaged. But every time you practice something new, your brain is then going to start saying, okay, you know what? This isn't dangerous. And also too, it's so powerful when you can say to yourself, my partner is trying to connect with me right here. This isn't dangerous. She wants my connection. And if you could view that, even though sometimes it's hard because if they have anger or vitriol in their voice, you're like, no, I'm out, shutting down. But if you can say to yourself, okay, no, she's trying to reach for me. And that's what I want to do too. It's all about connection.
Oh, man. Wow. Yeah. So helpful. Are there any red flags that might be apparent early on in the relationship regarding a partner's relationship with their parent that might be codependent or lead one day to a sort of, I don't know, unproductive, enmeshment in the relationship?
I'm always hesitant about red flags because I don't want to label something and then people go, oh, look, there it is. I'm out. Pull the chute, right? We're jumping out. So yeah, let's look at some things. But then also the most important thing is when you go and talk to your partner, are they willing to work through something with you? So I'm giving that little caveat to it. One of the red flags would be saying, I'm going to call my mom and check in with her on that. So this constant going back and making decisions only through mom. So that would tell me that there's no separation between the two. So that's a really good red flag. Another one is where a partner constantly feels responsible for mom's feelings. So maybe he says to his partner in the early days, like, oh no, we have to be there on Thanksgiving Thursday. That's when Thanksgiving happens and we can't deviate from that. That would tell me there's probably some rigidity and control in the family. Then maybe they'd be open to flexibility and changing things. I don't know. But would he be willing to go to his mom and say, hey, mom, we're going to do something different this year. I know you're upset about that, but that's really important to us. The other red flag is if he's always scapegoating her. So if he goes to his mom and says, oh, yeah, Tracy, doesn't want to come for Christmas this year. Or no, we can't come for Sunday patisserie because Tracy doesn't want to. That is creating this splitting effect between a couple. And one of the most important things partners want to do is to be that united friend, to be a we, so that families know you come as a package.
It's all very, it's super interesting. I just finished watching the new show Monster, the Ed Gein story.
I'm not familiar.
Have you ever heard of Ed Gein?
No.
He's one of the most famous serial killers of all time. He's the guy on which the movie Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. It's all about somebody who had a very unhealthy relationship with his mother, and ultimately became like one of the most well-known serial killers. I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, I guess he's only known for having killed 2 people. He dug up a bunch of dead bodies, but he had a very unhealthy relationship with his mother. And that story, it was just so crazy that it influenced pop culture in myriad ways. I mean, it was the basis for Psycho. It also became the basis for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it also became the basis for the Buffalo Bill character in Silence of the Lambs. But the only reason why I bring it up is because famously, he had this pathological relationship with his mom, and it led to all of these cancerous, malignant, attitudes towards women, and yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating story.
It just speaks to the power of what it means to grow up in a family and how much it impacts development. There's research looking at the difference between adults who were physically hit as kids versus adults who as kids were emotionally neglected. What group do you think did worse?
Those who were emotionally neglected?
Yeah. And it's because, as awful as that is, because as children, any attention is better than no attention. We need attention to survive. And so in the emotionally neglect group, if your parents aren't present, if they left you somewhere to be on your own or to care for the siblings, or, just continuously not being acknowledged for your feelings or denied even, that is more harmful than what it means to be hit. You got attention as a kid, not great attention, but it was there. You knew your parent cared for you, as hard as that is to think.
Yeah.
Right? And so this idea of how do we grow up, I think is so important. And when I outlined those systems in the book, I think there's so much compassion first, because when I think of extended family members who get stuck in these patterns, I am also mindful that they're products of their own patterns. And we think of how so many people are using the term, we're reparenting ourselves right now, or we're cycle breakers. That's powerful, and their parents probably broke some of those cycles too. I often think of my clients who will say, nobody ever acknowledged my feelings. I felt abandoned as a kid. And then they were able to say, well, I also know that my mom was physically abused, grew up in an alcoholic home, and she didn't do that to me. So we're cycle breaking in some way. And then at the same time, though, what's difficult is that then we have family who engage in things like denial, which is such a harmful strategy, rigidity and control, parentification, personalization, taking everything that your son and daughter-in-law does to make it about yourself. And those patterns then stop people from being connected.
Well, it also, what you're saying kind of affirms that there is no one-size-fits-all way of parenting, and that perfection doesn't exist. The best thing that you can do as a parent is just be there emotionally for your kids. That there's no perfect magical paradigm for parenting. There are many ways to peel the carrot.
Yeah.
But what you don't want to do is be emotionally distant, negligent, avoidant.
Yeah, that emotional attunement is so important. And when we think of what does an emotionally intelligent person do, they are aware of their own feelings without saying that you're responsible for my feelings. They show up with respect and curiosity. There's a sense of mutuality and wanting to bring you into the family. I have so many people who share with me that they were excluded from family events and that they always felt like an outsider or the scapegoat in their in-law family.
Is there anything surprising that stood out to you over the course of writing your book?
That's a good question. Doing this work clinically for so long, the book just came out. It was so ready to be written. And I wonder if maybe it's not so much surprising, but what was interesting is just how many women would ask me, how do I make sure I get to be the good mother-in-law? How do I not repeat what has happened to me? And so I've included a section in the book so that people can follow, how do we integrate families? How do we develop healthy, functioning families with flexibility and openness and togetherness? And so that was really interesting as I wrote it.
Interesting. So women who are the mother-in-laws themselves would come see you.
Both. Yeah. Mothers-in-law are saying, hey, I do want to fix this. I'm having this hard experience. How do I show up differently? And also too, Max, all of this work is about recognizing you don't get to control other people. And that often stirs up a lot of grief for us. It requires us to understand that we had expectations and those weren't met. And so we have to do some of that work for ourselves. But then on the same coin of that, or the flip side rather, is that daughters-in-law come to me saying, okay, so how do I then build this healthy relationship with my 5-year-old son, 10-year-old son, my teenager son, so that I'm not repeating the same conflict?
So what do you have to say to any mothers-in-law or mother-in-laws, mothers-in-law that are listening to this?
Isn't it a tongue twister?
Yeah, a bit.
For the mothers-in-law, I would say that your role is still important, but it is changing and you have to accept that. And that doesn't mean you're not important, but it's to then see the couple and to help them prioritize their relationship. Turn them toward each other. Don't get in the middle. So don't center yourself in their story. Allow them to have their own story and then to show up beside them and to get really curious about their reasons for their decisions or about what they need and what they're struggling with. A lot of curiosity is needed. But then if I were to sum up so much of what people could do in this, it's about depersonalization. I hear from so many mothers-in-law that the decision their daughter-in-law made around something, they didn't invite so-and-so to the wedding. They chose when to welcome, nobody in the delivery room after baby was born, something like that. It's personal. It's about them and their lovability. And so I say to mothers-in-law, this is not about you. You cannot take this personal. And because when you do, then you just go completely inside yourself. There's no other awareness. And healthy relationships do self and other. And then we go back to self and say, well, how am I experiencing you? And then how do we make this work together? And so if we could do more of that, then we would be going down a different path. And then also to flexibility, recognizing that your son and his partner or whoever it is, they're going to do things differently today. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just all for you to be curious about.
Yeah, it's important to know your place, I think.
Your place is, and I'm a mother of a son, so I always want people to hear this, you will always be the mother to your son. I'm like, you're there, I won't use me, but yeah, I'm there for when he took his first step, when he scored that goal in soccer, when he says to me, no, Mom, we're not going to hang out tonight. I'm going to go play with friends across the street at the park. Or when he comes to me and gives me this snuggle. 10-year-old snuggles are amazing. It's so cool watching boyhood.
Aww.
It's so cool. And at the same time, though, it's not personal. My job is to help him grow and be autonomous and turn him towards his own identity, not wrapped up in my feelings. And I always say to him, I'm angry at the situation. I'm not angry at you. My feelings are not yours.
I love that. Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing your work with us. Super cool. It's definitely, I think, a fascinating topic and one that a lot of people will benefit from learning more about. I've got one last question for you, but before we get to that, where can people find you on social media? I know you have your own podcast and your book, which just dropped. Where can people pick that up?
You can find me at Dr. Tracy D. My favorite thing is when people come in and say hello. I'm social on Instagram, Threads, all the things. Like, come say hello to me. That's my favorite part of being on social. And then everything is on my website, Dr. Tracy D.
Love it. Love to hear it. The last question that gets asked to everybody on the show, what does living a genius life mean to you?
That is in connection with others. And as an attachment therapist, just understanding the power of being able to sit in my own vulnerability and to share that with another person and to have that sense of connection, that's life.
Beautifully put. Well, thanks for coming out.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you guys for listening. Share this episode with friends and loved ones who may benefit from it. And I'm going to have a carrot salad for lunch, I think. That you inspired me in more ways than one. Thanks for coming out. Thank you, guys. Catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.